She was about to question him further when his phone buzzed. He picked it up, and his face, for the first time, shifted. It was no longer calm and unreadable, but a mask of focused intensity. He walked to the window and spoke in a low, authoritative tone. "Get me the latest financial reports on the Kingston Group. I want to see every single transaction from the last 6 months. And move the acquisition of that new tech company to next week. I want to wrap it up before they have a chance to react." Lily spun around, her eyes wide with shock. "How do you know that—" At the altar, Daniel looked every bit the dashing groom, his eyes fixed on her, or so she thought. As she reached him, a fragile smile on her lips. A strange tension settled over the room. It was not the reverent silence of a wedding, but the suffocating hush of an impending storm. Lily's father, the stern but loving Mr. Kingston, stood proudly beside her. Her mother, Mrs. Kingston, was a picture of poise, her face a mask of elegant anticipation. But next to them, Lily noticed her sister, Clara, standing a little too close to Daniel's mother. Her lips curled in a smirk that sent a shiver down Lily's spine. "I've been monitoring them," he admitted, his gaze unwavering. "I knew they would try something like this. They're not just after your family's money, they're after the company itself. Daniel's family, the Albrights, have always had their eye on the Kingston Group. They're working in tandem with someone else?" The minister cleared his throat, a gentle reminder that they were moments away from forever. He began his solemn words, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "We are gathered here today to witness the union of two souls." "Who?" she demanded. It was then that the silence was shattered. Daniel's mother, a woman known for her icy demeanor, stepped forward. Her voice, amplified by the microphone she had snatched from the minister, cut through the air like a shard of glass. "I can't tell you yet," he said, a quiet resolve in his tone. "The plan is still in motion. But you have to listen to me. Lily, you can't fight them alone. You're not in a position of power right now. You have to let me help. This marriage will not proceed." For the first time since their bizarre marriage, Lily saw Liam not as her jailer or her manipulator, but as a potential ally. He had knowledge, power, and a strange, deep-seated interest in her family's well-being. The man who had been a quiet presence, a backdrop to her despair, was now a voice of reason and a source of unexpected strength. Her anger was still there, a simmering ember, but the helplessness was beginning to recede. A fragile, tenuous connection, forged in fire and betrayal, was beginning to form. She knew, deep down, that she was no match for Daniel and Clara alone. But with Liam, a man who seemed to know their every move, she just might have a fighting chance. A collective gasp swept through the guests. Lily's heart froze in her chest. She looked at Daniel, her eyes pleading for an explanation. His gaze met hers for a fleeting second, devoid of any warmth, before shifting to the side. Her worst fears, the ones she had dismissed as paranoid anxieties, began to materialize. Lily's mind, once a whirlwind of anger and resentment, was now a storm of intrigue and desperate hope. Liam, the man she had dismissed as a lowly security guard, had revealed himself to be a hidden king, a silent titan of industry with the power to both save and destroy her. Her initial rage had given way to a fragile, burgeoning trust. She needed to know everything. The reason for his deception, his connection to her family, and the full extent of the plot against her. "My son, Daniel, Mrs. Albright continued, her voice ringing with a cruel, triumphant certainty, has realized his true feelings lie elsewhere. He has made his choice." One evening, Liam returned to the apartment with a key in his hand. "Get dressed," he said, his voice softer than usual. "We're not staying here tonight. It's time you saw where I really live." And then, in a moment that would forever be seared into Lily's memory, Mrs. Albright turned to Clara. With a flourish, she took Clara's hand and placed it in Daniel's. Daniel, the man who had professed his undying love to Lily for 7 years, now looked at her sister with a soft, possessive smile. Lily was a whirlwind of emotions, apprehension, curiosity, and a strange thrill of the unknown. She put on a simple dress, the only one she had, and followed him out. They drove for what felt like an eternity, leaving the familiar city lights behind and venturing into a secluded, wooded area. They passed through a massive iron gate and drove up a winding, private road. As they rounded a corner, Lily's breath caught in her throat. "He is marrying Clara," Mrs. Albright declared, Before her stood a sprawling estate, a modern architectural masterpiece of glass and steel that seemed to rise from the earth itself. It was a stark contrast to the old-world opulence of her family's mansion. Yet it exuded a power and presence that was undeniable. The sheer scale and luxury of the place were staggering. This was not the home of a wealthy man. This was the fortress of a corporate emperor. The words were a physical blow. The world tilted on its axis. The luxurious ballroom, the smiling faces, the music, all of it faded into a blurry, indistinct chaos. The only thing Lily could see was the smug, victorious look on Clara's face as she stared back at her, her eyes a mirror of the betrayal. Clara, her own flesh and blood, had stolen the man Lily was supposed to marry. Inside, the house was a marvel of minimalist design and cutting-edge technology. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city skyline in the distance. The furniture was sleek and expensive, a testament to a man of both power and refined taste. Lily felt like she had stepped into another world, a world where Liam Thorne was not a shadow, but a monarch. Lily's father, Mr. Kingston, roared in outrage. "What is the meaning of this? This is an outrage." "This is where you live," she whispered, her voice full of awe and a new, humbling respect. Mrs. Kingston, for the first time in Lily's life, lost her composure. She lunged at Mrs. Albright, her elegant facade cracking under the weight of the humiliation. The guests began to whisper, their voices a rising tide of judgment and pity. The fairy tale had become a public spectacle, a brutal demolition of her dignity. Liam nodded, his gaze gentle as he watched her take in the sight. This is the real me. Or at least, part of it. Lily stood frozen. The magnificent train of her wedding dress a tragic monument to her shattered dreams. She was an object of mockery, a spectacle for the wealthy to feast upon. The love she had cherished was nothing but a lie, a carefully constructed facade to conceal a deeper, more insidious betrayal. The laughter she imagined, the pitying looks she received, were all a testament to her downfall. The shame was a physical weight, crushing her. She needed to escape, to disappear, to vanish from the face of the earth, but her feet were rooted to the spot, a prisoner in her own humiliation. They sat in the living room, a fire crackling softly in a minimalist hearth. The silence was heavy, but no longer suffocating. It was a silence of anticipation, of an impending revelation. In her moment of most profound despair, she lifted her gaze from the hateful tableau of Daniel and Clara. Her eyes, blurred with unshed tears, scanned the crowd, a sea of judgmental faces. And then she saw him. "Lily, I'm going to tell you everything," he began, his voice low and solemn. "Years ago, your father and my father were close friends. They were both brilliant, ambitious men who built their companies from nothing. They were partners, not just in business, but in life. They had a dream of merging their companies to create an unstoppable force in the industry. In the back, near the entrance, a lone figure stood out from the crowd. He was a security guard, dressed in a simple, pressed uniform, his expression unreadable. He wasn't sneering or gossiping. He was just watching. His dark eyes, surprisingly gentle and full of a quiet understanding, met hers across the ballroom. For a fleeting second, she felt a strange, inexplicable connection. A life raft in the turbulent sea of her shame. Lily listened, a knot forming in her stomach. This was a side of her father's history she had never heard before. Her mind, usually so sharp and calculated, was a whirlwind of rage and desperation. She had been publicly humiliated. They had taken her fiancé, her sister, her wedding day, but she would not let them take her dignity. Not completely. But there was a third party. Liam continued, his voice hardening. A man who saw their success and became consumed by jealousy. He orchestrated a plot to pit them against each other, to create a schism between two great friends. He leaked false information, created fake documents, and ultimately drove a wedge between them. My father, in his fury and despair, believed your father had betrayed him. He sold his shares, walked away from the company, and died a broken man a few years later. His name was Arthur Thorne. The grand ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel glittered with the opulence of old money, a fitting backdrop for the wedding of Lily Kingston, the sole heiress of the prestigious Kingston Group, and Daniel Albright, the scion of a powerful real estate empire. Hundreds of guests, a who's who of high society, watched with bated breath as Lily, resplendent in a custom-made gown of ivory silk and lace, glided down the aisle. Her heart was a drum against her ribs, a mix of nervous energy and pure, unadulterated joy. For years, she had loved Daniel. Their romance had been the stuff of tabloids and whispers, a fairy tale in a world of cutthroat business and calculated marriages. Today, that fairy tale was finally becoming a reality. Lily's hand flew to her mouth. The name Thorne was not just the name of a rival company, it was the name of a family who had suffered a great injustice. The pieces of the puzzle were finally clicking into place. The rivalry, the animosity, the hidden pain in Liam's eyes, it all made sense now. An insane, reckless idea sparked in her mind. A fire born from the ashes of her pride. She would not leave this wedding as a victim. She would leave it as a married woman. She would turn this humiliation into an act of defiance. And the man in the back, the silent observer with the kind eyes, would be her unwilling accomplice. She began to walk. Not to the exit, but straight towards him. The grand ballroom now a stage for her final, desperate act. And the man who did this, the one who tore their friendship apart, was the same man who orchestrated your humiliation, Liam said, his gaze unwavering. Daniel Albright's father. The world around Lily was a kaleidoscope of broken dreams and shattered dignity. As she began her long, defiant walk toward the back of the ballroom, every eye in the room was fixed on her. The whispers were no longer a tide, but a cacophony, a storm of judgment and pity. Her parents were in a heated, furious exchange with Mrs. Albright, but their anger was lost in the chaos. All that mattered was the man at the end of her path. Lily's world, already turned upside down, now fractured completely. The man who had been her fiancé, the man she had loved, was not just a traitor, but the son of a man who had destroyed her father's closest friend. The betrayal ran deeper than she could have ever imagined. He stood against a gilded pillar, his presence a calm anchor in the swirling tempest. He was tall, with broad shoulders that filled out his simple uniform, and a face that was both rugged and handsome in a way that spoke of a hard life, not an easy one. He was a stark contrast to the pampered, polished men in the room, especially Daniel, whose betrayal now felt all the more vulgar. Liam took her hand, his touch surprisingly tender. "I've been watching you for years, Lily, from a distance. My father's last wish was for me to find out the truth and to make things right. I went to the same parties, the same galas you did. I saw you. And I fell in love with you. I fell in love with your kindness, your spirit, your strength. I saw that you were not like the others in your world, and I knew I had to protect you. I knew Daniel and his family were dangerous. That's why I was there, at your wedding, as a security guard. I wanted to make sure you were safe. When he left you, when he broke your heart, I couldn't just stand by and watch. I had to intervene." Lily stopped in front of him, her wedding dress pooling around her feet like a defeated army. Her face, a moment ago a mask of despair, was now set in a furious, determined glare. She saw the shock in his dark eyes, but also something else, a flicker of an emotion she couldn't name. Pity, concern. No, it felt deeper, more sincere than that. His words, a torrent of long-held secrets and bottled-up emotions, washed over her. Her anger was gone, replaced by a profound sense of awe and gratitude. This man, a powerful CEO, had risked everything for her. He had lived a double life, all to protect her from a danger she never even knew existed. He had not married her for money or power, but for love, a love that had been born from a silent, unwavering devotion. Lily looked at him, not as a stranger, but as her savior, her protector, and her destiny. "Marry me," she said, her voice low and firm, a command born from a place of pure, reckless adrenaline. The night of revelations had shattered Lily's world, but it had also rebuilt it on a foundation of truth. Her anger towards Liam had evaporated, replaced by a profound sense of awe and a nascent trust. The man she had married was not a manipulative schemer, but a devoted protector who had been watching over her and her family for years. His story of the two fathers, the betrayed partnership, and the Albright family's insidious revenge plot resonated with a heartbreaking authenticity. The man's expression remained unreadable, but a faint crease appeared between his brows. "Ma'am," he asked, his voice a deep baritone that was both respectful and wary. As dawn broke over Liam's sprawling estate, Lily found him standing on the terrace, his gaze fixed on the distant city skyline, a world he both commanded and hid from. She walked over and stood beside him, the silent tension of the past few days finally gone. "Marry me. Now. Here." Lily's hand shot out, grabbing his arm. She felt the surprising hardness of muscle beneath the fabric of his uniform. "I will not leave this room a humiliated woman. I will leave it as a bride. I will give you anything you want. My family will give you a fortune." "The documents. The information you were talking about," she began, her voice soft. "My father's business is in real trouble. Daniel and Clara are not just sabotaging us, they're getting ready to make their final move. They're planning to call an emergency board meeting to push for a new merger, one that would effectively put the Kingston Group in their hands." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips, a bitter acknowledgement of her desperation. "I don't want money, ma'am." Liam turned to her, his dark eyes filled with a new kind of intensity. "I know," he said, his voice a low, steady rumble. "I've been monitoring their every move. They've been siphoning off funds, leaking classified data, and spreading rumors to devalue your company. They are not just after the business, they are out for complete and total destruction." "Then what do you want?" she shot back, her fury rising. "This is your chance. You're a security guard. I can give you a new life, a future. My father—" "He must be devastated," Lily whispered, her heart aching for him. "He gave Daniel everything. He trusted him." His eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw the depth of them. They weren't just dark. They were a complex map of unspoken emotions, a flicker of pain, a hint of something she couldn't comprehend, and an intense, unwavering focus. "I don't want a fortune," he repeated, his voice softer this time. "Just give me your hand." "They counted on that trust," Liam said, a hard edge to his voice. "But they made one mistake. They didn't count on me, and they didn't count on you." A bizarre sense of calm washed over her. This man, a complete stranger, was offering a strange, silent solace that none of her family or friends had. She didn't know his name, his story, or why he was agreeing to her mad proposal. But in that moment, he was her only hope. She extended her hand, and his fingers, strong and calloused, wrapped around hers. It was a firm, grounding grip, unlike Daniel's soft, hesitant touch. He looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "We have to fight back, Lily. But we can't go in blind. We need irrefutable evidence. I have my resources, and you have your knowledge of your family's company. Together, we can expose them." He turned to the minister, who stood paralyzed with shock. "Sir, you are about to perform a marriage. The bride is ready. The groom is here. Proceed." For the first time since her world had been turned upside down, Lily felt a surge of power. She was no longer a victim, a humiliated bride, or a pawn in someone else's game. She was a partner, a warrior in a war she hadn't known she was fighting. The shared purpose between them was a powerful force, drawing them closer than any conventional romance ever could. The guests were now a frenzied mob of confused whispers and outraged exclamations. Lily's father, realizing what was happening, began to storm toward her, but her mother, surprisingly, held him back, a shrewd look in her eyes. It was a desperate move, an insane gamble, but it was still a move that saved face. A marriage, even to a security guard, was better than no marriage at all. "Tell me everything," she said, her voice firm and resolute. "Tell me where to start. We will expose them. We will get justice for our fathers, and we will get my family's company back." The minister, a kind man who felt a deep pity for Lily, reluctantly agreed. The man Lily now held hands with, the security guard, finally spoke. "My name is Liam." A faint smile touched Liam's lips, a genuine one that reached his eyes and softened their intensity. "That's the Lily I fell in love with," he said, the words slipping out without a hint of hesitation. "The one who doesn't back down, who fights for what's right." "Lily," she whispered back, the name feeling foreign on her tongue in this new, surreal context. The confession, so simple and sincere, made Lily's heart skip a beat. She was still reeling from the events of the past few days, but in this moment, a new feeling blossomed. It wasn't just trust, it was something deeper, warmer, and more profound. It was a love that had been born from the ashes of betrayal, forged in the fires of a shared purpose. She and Liam, the unlikely couple, were now a united front, ready to take on the corporate behemoth that had sought to destroy them. Their shared mission for justice was not just about saving a company, it was about reclaiming their past, healing old wounds, and building a future together. The minister's words were a blur. The vows were a formality. The rings were a desperate improvisation, as Liam had none, and Lily's exquisite engagement ring from Daniel was now a painful symbol of betrayal. She took it off and threw it to the ground, its sparkle a defiant tear. Liam, without a word, simply took a simple silver band from his own finger, a plain, unadorned ring, and slid it onto hers. It was a perfect fit. The minister declared them man and wife. The applause was non-existent. Only the furious shouts of her parents and the triumphant sneers of Daniel and Clara filled the air. But Lily didn't care. She had done it. She had defied them all. She looked at Liam, her new husband, the stranger with the deep, kind eyes. He was her lifeboat. But in her heart, she also knew he was her pawn in her game of revenge, and she had no intention of making it a real marriage. As they walked out of the ballroom, she held her head high, the train of her dress a banner of her stubborn, unbroken spirit. Liam's hand was still in hers, his grip unwavering. She didn't notice the way his eyes lingered on her, not with lust or greed, but with a profound, almost tragic depth of emotion. She was unaware that this man, this stranger she had forced into a marriage, had loved her for years from afar, and that he had just made the ultimate sacrifice to protect her from a world that had just broken her. The game had just begun, and the stakes were higher than she could ever imagine. Lily, no longer the broken bride from a week ago, entered with an air of quiet power. She was dressed in a sharp, elegant business suit, her posture straight, her eyes resolute. By her side, Liam, in a perfectly tailored suit that spoke of immense wealth, looked every bit the powerful CEO he was. His presence was a stark contrast to the unassuming security guard they all believed him to be, and it sent a ripple of unease through the room. The morning after their bizarre, impromptu wedding, Lily awoke in a small, almost sterile apartment she didn't recognize. The opulent trappings of her life, the silk sheets and the panoramic city views, were gone. Instead, she found herself in a Spartan living space, furnished with a utilitarian simplicity that spoke of a man who owned little and needed less. The only sign of her own life was her crumpled wedding dress, a white ghost in the corner of the room. "What is the meaning of this?" Daniel demanded, his face a mask of shock and fury. "This is a private board meeting. You're not a part of this, Lily. And who is this man?" The events of yesterday came crashing back, a tidal wave of humiliation and recklessness. She was married to a security guard, a stranger. The shame and anger from the public spectacle were still raw, but beneath it, a sliver of defiant pride remained. She had refused to be a victim. She had married the first man she saw to save her dignity, and now she had to deal with the consequences. Lily's father, Mr. Kingston, looked on, his face a mixture of hope and fear. He had been devastated by the company's recent struggles and was bracing for the worst. The door to the bedroom opened, and Liam walked in. He was no longer in his uniform, but a simple t-shirt and jeans that fit him perfectly, highlighting his lean, muscular frame. He carried a tray with a simple breakfast toast, eggs, and a cup of coffee. He placed it on the small table and sat opposite her, his expression as calm and unreadable as ever. "I am a part of this," Lily said, her voice clear and strong, "because this is my family's legacy, and this man is my husband, Liam Thorne." "Eat," he said, his voice a low, steady rumble. "You didn't have anything last night." The name Thorne hit the room like a thunderclap. Gasps and whispers erupted. The most powerful CEO in the country, the head of their biggest rival, was married to Lily Kingston Daniel, and Clara's faces, a moment ago smug and triumphant, now paled with a terrifying realization. Their carefully constructed plan was falling apart before their eyes. Lily's initial reaction was to lash out, to demand to know who he was and what he thought he was doing. But the quiet sincerity in his dark eyes, the simple act of bringing her breakfast, disarmed her. She found herself unable to speak, the words of anger and contempt dying in her throat. She simply nodded and picked up a fork. The food, though simple, was delicious and nourishing. "This is an outrageous lie," Clara shrieked, her facade of elegance crumbling You can't just come in here and lie your way to power. Their days began to fall into a strange, unsettling rhythm. Lily, in her fury and despair, refused to go back to her family home. The thought of facing her parents and the victorious faces of Daniel and Clara was unbearable. Liam, in turn, did not press her. He was a silent, dutiful presence. He would leave for work in the mornings and return in the evenings, always bringing home groceries for her to cook. She found herself, for the first time in her life, doing her own chores, cooking her own meals, and living a life of true simplicity. She hated it, but she also found a strange, grudging solace in the routine. Liam, however, remained calm. He placed a sleek tablet on the table and, with a few taps, projected a series of documents onto the large screen. The first document was a detailed report of Daniel Albright's off-the-books transactions, siphoning off millions of dollars from the Kingston Group to a shell company. The second showed Clara's private communications, revealing her collusion with Daniel and her deliberate leaking of confidential information to their competitors. She had convinced herself that Liam was a simple, uneducated man. She would often mock him with thinly veiled contempt, referencing his lowly job and the primitive way he lived. But Liam never reacted. He would simply watch her, his eyes full of a hidden sadness and a patience that infuriated her. The board members, many of whom had blindly supported Daniel and Clara, stared at the screen in horrified silence. The evidence was irrefutable. One evening, as she was watching the news, a report came on about her family's company, the Kingston Group. The reporter spoke of a sudden, unexpected drop in their stock price, a series of failed business deals, and the growing rumors of corporate espionage. Lily's heart sank. She knew Daniel and Clara were behind it, a final act of greed to bring her family to its knees. She felt a wave of helplessness, trapped in this small apartment, unable to fight back. But Liam wasn't finished. He then projected a final, shocking document. It was an old file, a record of a secret partnership between their fathers, Arthur Thorne and Lily's father, Mr. Kingston. And attached to it was an explosive piece of evidence, a signed confession from Daniel's father, Mr. Albright, detailing how he had framed Arthur Thorne and pitted the two friends against each other, all to seize power for himself. Liam, who was silently washing dishes, turned off the tap and looked at her. "You're worried about the company. The betrayal you all thought was a recent plot," Liam said, his voice cold and commanding, "is a generational curse. Daniel and Clara were not just sabotaging this company. They were finishing the work their father started. They destroyed a friendship, a partnership, and a family, all for greed and power." "Of course, I am," she snapped, her frustration boiling over. "My father spent his life building that company, and they're going to tear it all down. I can't do anything here." The room was in chaos. Daniel and Clara, their lies exposed and their plot unraveling, screamed and raged, their true, ugly selves finally on display. Mr. Kingston, his heart heavy with the weight of the past, looked at Liam with tears in his eyes, a silent apology for his father's past mistake, and a deep gratitude for the justice Liam had brought. Liam walked over and sat beside her on the worn sofa. "You can," he said simply. "You just need to know how to fight them." The confrontation reached its peak when Daniel lunged at Liam, but he was quickly restrained by security. The meeting ended with Daniel and Clara being escorted out by the police, their dreams of power and wealth shattered. Lily, her voice trembling but firm, addressed the stunned board members. "And you think you know how?" she scoffed, the condescension returning. "What do you know about corporate strategy? You're a security guard. You sit in a booth and watch cameras. This company," she said, her gaze sweeping across the room, "was built on my father's honesty and integrity, and we will rebuild it on the same principles." His face remained impassive, but his eyes held a strange glint of something she couldn't place. "I know enough," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "I know who they are, what they want, and how they operate." The battle was won. Justice, so long delayed, was finally served. Lily and Liam, their paths inextricably linked, stood together, ready to face a new, brighter future. Lily was speechless. The confidence and authority in his voice were completely at odds with her perception of him. Who was this man? She had forced him to marry her, treated him like a servant, and yet he was sitting here, talking about corporate strategy with the same ease he brought her breakfast. The final, chaotic moments of the board meeting left an eerie silence in their wake. The police had escorted Daniel and Clara out, their enraged shouts echoing down the hallway until they were finally gone. Lily's father, Mr. Kingston, stood trembling, not with fear, but with the profound weight of a past he had never truly understood. He walked over to Liam, his eyes full of a raw, heartfelt apology. The atmosphere in the boardroom was tense, thick with the weight of impending conflict. Daniel and Clara sat smugly at the head of the table, surrounded by the board members of the Kingston Group, many of whom were either complicit or unaware of their deception. The emergency meeting they had called was meant to be their coronation, the final nail in the coffin of the Kingston Group, and a public humiliation for Lily's father. But as Lily and Liam walked in, a wave of stunned silence fell over the room. "Arthur's son," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "All these years, I never knew. I let his memory be sullied, and I let his betrayer's son into my home, into my family. I'm so sorry." Lily's heart stopped. She knew those terms: acquisition, financial reports, new tech company. They were the language of the business elite, the very world she had been born into. She watched as he finished the call, a completely different person from the security guard she had married. Liam, for the first time, revealed a hint of the pain he had carried. "You were both victims. Mr. Kingston, it's over now." He turned to her, his expression a mix of apology and resignation. "It's time you knew the truth," he said. "I am not a security guard." The two men shared a silent, profound moment of reconciliation, a healing of a wound that had festered for decades. Then, Mr. Kingston turned to his daughter, his eyes brimming with pride and love. He had seen her at her lowest, and now he was seeing her at her most powerful. "Then who are you?" she whispered, the words barely audible. "Lily," he said, taking her hand. "I was a fool. I should have seen it. But you stood up to them. You saved us all." "My name is Liam Thorne," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "I am the CEO of the Thorne Group." Lily smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that had been absent for too long. "We saved us all. Father, Liam and I, we did it together." The name hit her like a thunderbolt. The Thorne Group, the Kingston Group's biggest rival. The reclusive CEO who had built his company from the ground up, a silent shadow in the corporate world, was now standing in front of her. The man she had publicly married to save face was not a lowly security guard, but a hidden titan of industry, a man with the power to both destroy and save her. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place: the quiet strength, the surprising knowledge, the strange, sad look in his eyes. He wasn't a pawn in her game of revenge. He was the king, and he had been playing a different game all along. The days that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and corporate restructuring. With the evidence Liam had provided, the police moved swiftly to freeze Daniel and Clara's assets and open a full investigation into their embezzlement and corporate espionage. The Albright family's empire, built on a foundation of lies and betrayal, began to crumble, its public image in ruins. The justice that had been so long denied was finally being served. The revelation of Liam Thorne's true identity left Lily's world spinning once more. The small, unassuming apartment no longer seemed a simple home, but a stage for a grand deception. The man she had mocked and belittled was not a pauper she had saved, but a king who had orchestrated his way into her life. Her initial shock gave way to a storm of emotions: betrayal, anger, and a deep-seated confusion. What game was he playing? Why had he pretended to be someone else? And what did he truly want from her? The Kingston Group, however, was in a state of fragile recovery. The board, having witnessed the spectacular takedown of their former leaders, was now in a state of disarray. They looked to Mr. Kingston for leadership, but he, having been so close to his own downfall, was ready to step aside. "You've been watching me," she finally said, her voice a brittle whisper. "All this time. Why?" "It's your time, Lily," he said to her one evening, as they sat in his study. "You showed more courage and intelligence in one day than I have in a lifetime. The company is yours to lead." Liam's face was uncharacteristically pensive, his usual stoicism replaced by a quiet vulnerability. "It's complicated," he began, and then stopped. He had wanted this moment to be different, a calm, gentle unveiling. But the fury in her eyes, the pain that mirrored her wedding day, was a raw wound he had to tread carefully around. And so, Lily, with Liam's unwavering support and guidance, took her rightful place as the new CEO of the Kingston Group. She was no longer just the heiress. She was a leader, a visionary, and a force to be reckoned with. She implemented sweeping changes, focusing on integrity, transparency, and a renewed sense of purpose. The company, under her fierce and compassionate leadership, began to thrive once more. Complicated, she scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. I was publicly humiliated. My life was destroyed. And all the while, you, a man with the power to do anything, just watched from the sidelines. What was this? A social experiment. A way to see how the other half lives. The strange, desperate marriage had now evolved into something real, something beautiful. Lily and Liam moved into their own home, a place of peace and genuine affection. Their relationship, born from a moment of chaos and deception, was now built on a foundation of unwavering trust, respect, and a love that had weathered the storm. No, Lily, he said, taking a step closer. It was never that. I have my own reasons that are tied to your family, to your father, and to the very people who betrayed you. One night, as they stood on the balcony of their new home, looking at the city lights, Lily leaned her head on his shoulder. I never thought, a week ago, I thought my life was over. I was a laughingstock, a broken doll. His words only fueled her anger. Don't talk about my family. You have no right. You're a liar, a master manipulator. She wanted to hit him, to scream, to shatter the calm facade he had meticulously built, but the sheer weight of his presence, the quiet strength that had once comforted her, now felt intimidating. Liam wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. You were never broken, he said, his voice a gentle caress. You were just waiting to be set free. I've loved you for a long time, Lily, and I never stopped believing in you. For the next few days, the tension in the apartment was suffocating. Lily treated Liam with a cold, resentful silence, refusing to engage with him or acknowledge his attempts at conversation. She was now a prisoner, not just of her circumstance, but of his secret. Her phone, which had been silent since the wedding, began to buzz with alarming news alerts. The Kingston Group's stock was plummeting. There were rumors of a hostile takeover, of key investors pulling out, of confidential projects being leaked to competitors. She turned to face him, her eyes shining with unshed tears of happiness. I love you too, Liam. You saved me, and in a way, I saved you, too. We healed our past together. The news was a painful echo of Liam's earlier phone call. She knew, with a sinking feeling, that Daniel and Clara were behind it. They were not just content with taking her husband and her dignity, they wanted to take her family's legacy. Her father, the man who had built an empire from nothing, was being systematically dismantled by the very people he had trusted. Their forced marriage had been a moment of desperation, but it had turned out to be a stroke of fate. It had brought together two people who were meant to be, to heal old wounds, to find justice, and to build a new life together. One built not on the ruins of the past, but on the promise of a beautiful and genuine future. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Stay with us for the next one. And while you're here, check out our other videos. There's always more to explore. One evening, Lily was pacing the small living room, a flurry of helpless rage. The television screen flashed a headline. Kingston Group faces bankruptcy, C-suite shakeup imminent. She stopped, staring at the words, her hands clenched into fists. She felt powerless, a victim once again, watching her world burn from a small, sterile apartment. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. Liam, who had been silently observing her, finally spoke. They're targeting the supply chain, he said, his voice quiet and analytical. They've been leaking sensitive information to a third-party competitor, making sure your father's contracts fall through. It's a classic three-pronged attack: financial destabilization, corporate espionage, and a direct assault on the board.